what it really came down to was like, I had to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. I had to like admit that I had a problem and that I wanted to make a change. I had to be the one who said like, I can't do this anymore. And I kind of gave up, which sounds weak, but it was really freeing. And when I gave up, I knew I needed help.
You're listening to Bigger Than Belief, real stories about real faith with real people whose belief is unbelievable. I'm your host, Adam Duxter. Thanks for listening to Bigger Than Belief. Today is Thursday, August 13th. As always, I'm your host, Adam Duxter, coming to you from the podcast studios of the WCCO TV studio in downtown Minneapolis. And today I am really excited to have this guest on. It's someone we taped with a few months ago, but now are finding that it's the right time to share this conversation. Nick Hanson is a dad. He is a published author. He's a professional here in the Twin Cities. Actually met him and got introduced to him through another story I was covering through another organization. And we got to chatting. I told him, hey, I host this show about faith. And he said, I think I've got a story for you. And I think it's my story, honestly. And anytime someone says that, my ears perk up. And I was like, all right, let's hear it. And what Nick shared is a story of sobriety in his own life. But it ultimately, for me, boils down to a story of control. And I think even if you're someone who doesn't struggle with alcohol, maybe as the thing that is in your life, you can relate to this concept of struggling with control because we all do. Quite frankly, I do. Personally, in my own life right now, I feel like the biggest thing is having control over my finances. We have 2 young kids and accidents happen and we're homeowners. Things break around the house. And for me, it's like when something goes wrong and it's outside of this preconceived plan that I've had in my brain, I'm just like, oh no. I almost like panic. It's like the fridge went out. We got to replace it. What's going to happen? And I think the reason I struggle so bad with that is because it's like, you're not in control of your finances. You can try, and it's really smart to budget, don't get me wrong. But ultimately, like what happens with that portion of your life sometimes isn't up to you. And maybe it's not finances for you, but maybe it's something else. I think everyone can relate to having this feeling of, if I just work hard enough or spend enough time or devote enough effort to this, like I can control it. And simply put, there's things in your life that you can't control. And for Nick, it was alcohol. He drank socially. Drinking was always a part of his life. And he thought, hey, I've got a grip on this. But what happened to Nick, and maybe this happens to you in some point in time, or we see waves this does happen, is that the thing he thought he was controlling turned out to be controlling him. And when he tried to take a step back, he realized this is a lot more control over me than maybe I had originally thought, originally let on. Here's the cool thing though. Today, Nick is sober. He physically looks so much different. He's healthy. He's active. He's a published author. And again, he has, in his own words, freedom from something that had control over him for a long time. And the reason he's on this show is because his faith is a huge component of why that happened. I think you're really going to enjoy Nick's story. I think it's something that hopefully brings a lot of encouragement to you. And again, maybe it's not alcohol for you, but maybe there is a control factor in your life that you're really struggling with. And I think this episode and this taping could be really encouraging for you, regardless of what that thing you're trying to control is. If you've been listening to Bigger Than Belief, maybe it's your first time, welcome. And maybe you're a longtime listener, thank you. The number one way you could support this type of content is by engaging with it. Please, if you haven't already, follow us wherever you're listening, whether that's Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, so you don't miss an episode. And if you do like this type of content, please take a moment and give us a 5-star rating. That helps us tremendously. Over 115 of you have done that already. But the reality is with these algorithms is that if you do that, it just helps promote us to even more people who might be searching for this type of content. If you are new here, we do this every single week. We share real stories about real people and the real faith that they share and the way that it's transforming their lives and the lives of other people around them. Simply put, we're trying to change the way traditional media talks about faith. And if that's something that excites you, please, again, follow so you don't miss us, and give us that 5-star rating so that we help get seen by more people. If you like this episode in particular, please take a second and just text us to a friend. Share this episode explicitly, or click that little share button. Send it to someone you think might get some encouragement from this, because I do think this is an encouraging episode. One last housekeeping thing. We have a live taping of Bigger Than Belief coming up at the Minnesota State Fair 3 weeks from today, Thursday, September 3rd at 12:30 at the Minnesota State Fair. We are taping a live episode of Bigger Than Belief in front of a live studio audience. It is incredible, at our booth at WCCO. I want to see you there. If you've been a listener, please come introduce yourself. We'll be taking photos with people. I want to meet you. I want to hear your story. This is also an awesome way to maybe introduce a friend to Bigger Than Belief. If you've been enjoying our type of content, come to the fair, sit with us for a half hour or so, listen to a cool, encouraging story from a guest that we'll have there, and introduce them to what we're doing there. Again, that's coming up here just 3 weeks from today. I am pumped for the Minnesota State Fair. All right, folks, this is a cool story about life, but it is also a really important story about control. This is Nick Hanson's story, and here it is right now. We now welcome on a very special guest. It's someone who I've been excited to have on for a while, because we've been talking about this for a little bit more than a month now, to have you in the building. This is Nick Hanson. You are a published author. You've got a story to share. Nick, thank you so much for taking the time to come in and join us and share your story.
Thanks for having me, Adam. I appreciate it.
And Nick, it's cool because we met in the fields through the work that I do, just being out covering other stories. And when I told you a little bit about this show, you were like, I actually think my story has a place or could fit in on this show. Before we dive into just the meat and potatoes of your story, I'd love for people to get a sense of just kind of who you are, and just like maybe the background, the quick facts, just of kind of life, where you're born, where you grew up, kind of anything you think that people should know about you before we dive into the bulk of your story.
Well, there's nothing too spectacular about me, but so I'm 43. I just turned 43. I have 3 kids, 9, 6, and 3 years old. So very busy at home, lots of stuff going on with them, but in a good way, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, just trying to get through life right now, doing the best I can and everything. I grew up in St. Paul. I still live in the Twin Cities here, and I have for all my life. So born and raised in Minnesota, love it here, and just living life the best I can every day.
Mm. Your story is sobriety and alcoholism into sobriety. But also the role that your faith plays with that and has played with that, which is why we're so excited to have you on this show. You mentioned, you're in your young 40s. I guess when we talk about this story of sobriety or alcoholism, where did that start in your life? Where does that start?
Yeah, so my story is similar to a lot of people. I'm not super unique in how my addiction unfolded, my alcoholism unfolded. It's over 20 plus years of use that really it spiraled from, started out pretty fun. Then it was fun with some problems. And then it was just all problems kind of in the end, right? I grew up, alcohol was super normalized through everything as a child, into my teenage years and 20s. You go to any kind of celebration I went to growing up, there was alcohol. It didn't matter if it was a birthday party or a holiday or, a seasonal gathering or whatever. It would be weird if there wasn't beer and wine around, and I grew up around family members and friends who just drank all the time. And I think in some ways, they weren't necessarily getting really drunk all the time. It was it was just normalized to see drinking, kind of on a daily basis wherever I was. It's just super normalized. And I grew up around that. I remember even as a teenager, I got caught smoking cigarettes and I got in a bunch of trouble. But when it came to alcohol and beer, I was like, oh yeah, it's just the beer, it is what it is. So I grew up that way, and I didn't have a ton of huge problems as a teenager in high school. When I got into college, I had the typical, I'm an elder millennial, right? Went to college in the early aughts, and really drinking, it wasn't about just having a beer or, a cocktail with a friend. It was really about binge drinking and getting drunk and going out and doing kind of wild and crazy things and having these experiences with, my peers. And it wasn't only like that's what people did. And in a lot of ways, it was almost celebrated. It wasn't necessarily like a bad thing to go out and have a crazy night and black out or do something that you kind of regretted. You'd wake up in the morning and swap stories with your friends about, the things that you did. And it just kind of became normalized for me like that throughout college, And maybe if there were any signs, like, there's always Thursday nights, people going out, and Fridays and Saturdays. And it's like, it was pretty typical for me at least 2-3 nights a week to just, be going out drinking, binge drinking. But it didn't really I got through college. I had a good experience. I had internships, and I graduated and life was pretty good. And then, once I got into the real world, kind of one of the things that maybe I was suspecting that didn't happen is alcohol was really normalized in the professional world that I went into in my 20s too. It was like happy hours were a part of the daily life and the daily culture that I was experienced with. I would go out with my coworkers, we'd work hard and play hard, and we would go out and we would drink together and go to happy hours. And sometimes we'd have nights and Friday nights or Saturday nights. And it was like part of life. You'd go to conferences or work events, and people were usually drinking and drinking hard. I would see people with PhDs or, even whatever. They would drink excessively and maybe, get a little out of control. It seemed like it was just kind of part of life and what it was. It wasn't anything, it wasn't like I had this boundary where it was like, okay, you had your fun. Now you need to not drink. And you combine that with all the normalized drinking that I saw and grew up around and, was kind of part of my culture, my generation. And it just it doesn't go anywhere good, right? I made it through my 20s and a lot of my drinking was pretty social. As you get in your later 20s and people start to get families and have kids and maybe they cut down a little bit or whatever. And I think my thing was in my 20s, my drinking was social. Once I started getting in my 30s, I internalized it more. It became more inward. And I was drinking by myself and, I would be with, at night or at home with my people or, it wasn't necessarily at the bar or a happy hour. It was, or maybe I'd have more when I got back, from the bar. It was just or even I would get home at night, every night, it's 7 o'clock. It's well, it's time for a couple cocktails. You just kind of get into that pattern. It just becomes a way of life. And then I did start to have problems, significant things. I mean, I would say that too, even stretching back into my teens and 20s, there were a lot of things that happened that I regret or decisions that I would have made otherwise that I wouldn't have if I wasn't under the influence. But then, once you start getting into my 30s and, I met my significant other, started having relationship problems, lots of different things start to pile up and it became, it started to become a little bit unsustainable. And then I think for me, it fell into a pattern of how do I keep doing this? How can I manage? How can I cope with my drinking? But I don't want to quit drinking. And I think that's a myth. We see a lot. You hear about moderated drinking. Or you hear that some of the programs out there like AA and some of the stuff, they're almost 100 years old and they're antiquated. It's old dogma. Now we can help you to moderate your drinking or drink as much or little as you like, and we can manage your mental health, and that's a big aspect of it. And it's you don't even necessarily have to quit. And I looked into it and was if you Google, I dare you to Google moderated drinking, there's gonna be 100 different results that come up. And I would just say, if you are drinking enough where you feel like you need to research whether or not you're drinking enough, it's probably too late for you to have any kind of a approach where, oh, really, maybe I will be able to cut back, a whole lot. And I tried that, right? Most people who fall into, addiction, they have to fail on their own. And I tried to moderate. I went to a program where it was more about mental health and, how much do you want to drink? We'll help you get there. I tried that, and all of a sudden you realize once you start tracking your drinks and you're doing things, it's oh, I can only have 2, or I can only have 1, or I can't drink tonight. It's that's not enough, and I think it starts to come clear into the picture. And I struggle with that, but I think really, and this would not be, again, unique to me, is I was always a heavy drinker, and, I think I even kind of accepted that, but it kind of crossed the threshold from heavy drinking to, what you would probably more traditionally consider as alcoholism around COVID, right? Everything shut down. Social stuff was out. A lot of chaos going on in the world, especially here in Minnesota, Minneapolis. And, it went from like being a heavy drinker, drinking too much, having some consequences to like all consuming all the time. How much I'm going to drink, when I'm going to drink it, how am I going to get it, where am I going to put it, how am I going to pay for it, secretive, all that stuff, to just being almost completely unmanageable. And I did have, a few pretty tough things happen to me. And what it really came down to was like, I had to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. I had to like admit that I had a problem and that I wanted to make a change. I had to be the one who said like, I can't do this anymore. And I kind of gave up, which sounds weak, but it was really freeing. And when I gave up, I knew I needed help. I knew I couldn't just say, hey, I'm going to quit. I tried that dozens of times to just say I'm going to quit or moderate. I knew I needed help. So I was able to get that. I went to treatment, inpatient treatment, and that helped me a lot. But the key was I wanted to do it. I was ready. So when I had those tools at my disposal, I was able to get sober. And that was about 3 years ago. So here we are.
I'm curious, and I want to circle back to some of the things you said, but I'm curious, as we walk through that timeline of your life, from your 20s into your 30s, what role, if any, did faith play in your life or belief play in your life through that time? Was it any? Was it a lot? Was it not so much?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with faith. I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic high school. I always get the Jeopardy questions right on the Bible, but I didn't. I mean, I would never say I was like an atheist, and I kind of don't like the term agnostic, but faith was not like a big part of my life throughout, probably 20 years of my life. It wasn't a big role. It didn't have a lot to do with how I went in day to day. I thought that I was in control, right? I thought like I was in charge of everything, and everything that happens to me in my life is like purely like on me, and whatever is going good or bad, it's 100% like on me. I don't need anybody, even like bigger than faith. Like I don't need other people. I can do it myself. I can manage on my own. And that's where like, I think the first time when I finally admitted like I needed help and I wanted to get better, I had to realize like, I can't do this. I have to give up. I need help. How am I going to get that?
Did you anticipate as you started going through a recovery program, how big of a role the concept of faith and belief would play?
So I was apprehensive. Like you hear about recovery, and a lot of people know about AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and the program, and like it's pretty popularized in pop culture. And like, there's that Seinfeld episode where they're making fun of the guy because he's making amends with Jerry, but he won't do it with George, and they're all gossiping behind his back, and it's like, I couldn't imagine like possibly having to go into like a room full of people who are, calling themselves alcoholics and giving up and chain smoking cigarettes and, just miserable with their life and existence. And, it's like, that's not for me. Like I want to get better, but there's like science out there. And now there's all kinds of things I can do that like, have research and evidence base that'll be able to help me get sober. And you find that out, right? So both things can be true. Like, you go, for me, I went to inpatient treatment down in Owatonna at a place called Beauterre. It's part of a big organization called EOSIS. And there is a lot of education on science, like what's happening in the brain, what's happening, the patterns that you've been doing, what's the science behind addiction, like mental health, anxiety, depression, that's a huge role in use. And you learn about those things. How can I be successful in recovery? But then you learn, too, like, some of the biggest pieces, like the education is important, but some of the biggest pieces to sustain recovery are beyond science. It's a lot that has to do with community. Community is probably the biggest piece, I think, of successful recovery. And then believing in something greater than yourself and bigger than you to help guide you through that process and kind of letting go of all that control that you wanted to have before.
When that was explained to you for the first time, or you're kind of figuring that out, was the response like, oh, that's easy, I already have this faith background? Or was it like, this is going to take some reworking or getting used to? I'm curious what that was like for you on your walk.
I was still pretty apprehensive about when I was in treatment, saying like, I'm going to become a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, like I was not sure that I wanted to do that. You know, I was still kind of thinking, yeah, I got this. You know, like I can probably do it. There's other things out there, but they just kept drilling in like, you gotta have community. You gotta have other people to talk to, and it can't be the environment that you had, right? You can't go back and like expect support from your spouse or your wife or husband or your parents or, you know, your brother or sister or your best friend, because they don't understand what you've been through. They don't understand how you feel, what you did. They've been trying to help you for a long time, but they can never rationalize, like, why would he choose alcohol over me or this thing or this event? They don't understand. They haven't been there, more than likely, right? They haven't been through that experience. So when you need help, they're not going to be able to offer you the support that you need. So what you really need, your inner circle of recovery, are other people who are alcoholics and drug addicts. Mm-hmm. And it sounds kind of crazy if you're not part of the community, but that's who you need to guide you through it. Like when you are, especially early in recovery, and you get a craving or a trigger and you feel like using, you're going to want to call one of those people because, one, they've been through it, and two, like, they understand. If you call up your wife and tell her, she's like, oh, man, Nick's going to go back out again. What am I going to do? You know, like, you had to have other people from that community that can support and help you. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest, there are a number of community or places out there. There's online groups and communities. There's different things, but one of the biggest groups out there is Alcoholics Anonymous. It's been around for 90 plus years. And the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is it's everywhere, right? You can, if you're in the Twin Cities, you can find a meeting within like 10, 15 minutes of where you are pretty much all times of the day. If you go camping in northern Minnesota, you can find a meeting like that day within a half hour of where you're staying. If you go travel to Chicago or San Antonio or wherever, you can find meetings where there's going to be like-minded individuals, no problem. If you go overseas, you can find people in community that will be available to you when you need it, and they'll understand. You walk in, no judgment, no anything. So for me, it was like, okay, they're saying community is vital. You had to have community. Where am I going to find this community? How am I going to get it? I have to try AA. I have to go to AA because if I want to find other people who are successful in sobriety and I really want to stay connected and have people help me, I have to give AA a shot because I can meet other people who will be able to help me and get me through like this, because I don't want to go back. I don't want to fail. I need to look into it. And I apprehensively, was said, okay, I'm going to give AA a try and see what it's like. Dip my toes in the water, and I can get into more of that too. But.
And I think people have this idea of like an old kind of church basement, on like a Tuesday night, folding chairs set up in a circle. And maybe that is accurate. Maybe that's not. But you talked about though the role of like submitting to a higher power and admitting there's something bigger than yourself. And I'm really curious what that was like in your journey.
Yeah, I mean, just to step back one step, what you're saying was like AA. It's like anything else. You had to find a group that works for you, and there's all kinds of groups out there. There's male group, there's female groups. There are groups where there's 80-year-olds from the retirement home who show up to get coffee and donuts and just to like socialize. But if you go and you check out enough meetings, there's meetings where it's very religious. There's meetings where there's not much religion at all. You have to find what works for you. And when you find a meeting or a group that works for you, because there's so many, you probably can find one, then you'll meet like-minded people and you'll be able to grow your sense of community and, work from there and, hopefully make it work for you. But then once you start going to meetings too, I think it's like people are nervous, like, oh, it's a cult, or are they going to welcome me or judge me, or do I have to go in and start saying the Our Father and doing the sign of the cross and stuff? That's not what it is. Like you go in, these people know what it's like, how hard it is to walk into a room and sit down in a group of other people who are calling themselves alcoholics. For the most part, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to sign anything. You don't have to promise anything. You don't even have to say that I'm going to stay sober forever. I mean, you just show up and listen, and you hopefully like learn a few things, hear a few stories, hear people share, and take a few nuggets away. But once you're ready and you feel like, hey, this might work for me, then you can try to find a sponsor who can work you through the program. You can learn more about it, dive deep in, and you can start working the 12 steps. And that's where the higher power and the faith start to come into play and, help you move in to be successful in sobriety. So, and that's what I did, right? I went to a whole bunch of meetings. I found a bunch I didn't like, and then I found one I did like, and then I met a guy there, and he told me about another group, and then I found a men's group that I really liked, and then I found out about another meeting, and now I've got all kinds of great places I can go. I went, it's like they say when you go into a meeting, when you're looking for a sponsor, try to find somebody who has what you want. So it was like I found a guy who was about 10 years older than me, who'd been sober for about 10 years. He had 3 kids who were getting older and seemed successful. And it's like, oh, okay, this is somebody who looks like I can probably work with and can guide me through, the steps in AA. And I was able to find that. And I would say like this about AA too, which is like super helpful. It helps you take care of the things that helped you use in the first place. And it helps you move past the things that keep you using and keep you in that downward spiral to be successful and thrive in recovery and not just be sober and not just be not drinking, to be happy in a life of recovery and a life of sobriety, right? So really only the first step is about not drinking or using. Just admitting that your life's unmanageable and you can't keep going on the way that you are. Then really it's like you get into the second and third step. It's like, okay, there's something, a higher power than me. I can't manage this. Like I have to realize that like whatever I've been doing is not working. There is something that like I have to give it up. I have to give it to somebody else. I have to give it to, a God or, higher power or a God of my understanding. I have to give it up and realize like that this is something I can't do on my own. And that's very early in the process.
And you were saying before we got going, it's not even really stressed like it has to be a certain faith type. It's like you just need to admit there's something. It's not like, oh, this is the Judeo-Christian view or, like you were saying, like Buddhism, Christianity, just something. Was it for you like, oh, I've got this backgrounds, I went to Catholic school, like reconnecting, or what was that like for you when you get to that step and you're like, I've got this kind of background already. But as you'd mentioned, it was something that maybe wasn't the most active thing in your life.
Yeah. So you're totally right. Your higher power does not have to be the God with the beard in the clouds of, Christianity. It can be whatever you want. It can be, Allah, Buddha, Jesus, God, whoever. It can be the flying spaghetti meatball monster. It can be whatever you want. But for a lot of people, something greater in that beginning is actually the group. It's AA. It's the program. It's the consciousness of the people and the fellowship that you have. And that's what it was for me in the beginning. It was, look, there's all these people who I've gotten to know. They're successful in sobriety. They're happy with their lives. They're laughing. It's genuine. They're like actually excited about every day and the things that they're doing in their jobs and careers and, relationships and all these things. It's like, I can hold on to that, right? I can grab onto that. Like there's something going on here. I don't know what it is, but it's strong and it's powerful and it's moving me and I want it. So for me, and a lot of people early in sobriety who come to AA, the higher power is AA. It's the consciousness in the group. And that's what you're able to give up to. And that's what I did when I first gave up. It's okay. I don't have certain control, but you know what? Like I'm giving up and I'm starting to have success. This AA thing is really working for me. I'm learning, I'm getting all this wisdom from these folks. And for whatever reason, it's resonating with me, and that helped me for the like steps 2 and 3 when you admit, you don't have it under control and then you give it up to your higher power. Like I can do that. I can let go here. I don't have to, in addition to being in recovery and learning how to be sober and changing my life, I don't have to become a born again Christian or I don't have to become like devout in, my following of Jesus. I can do this with something that works for me. That helps you get through the beginning stages. And then you get to work on yourself, right? So steps like 4 and 5, you look in your past, you make a list, you make an inventory. Here's all the things I've done, right? And here's like the themes that come out of all the things. Like, man, I'm really like prideful, or, I'm really like, I notice that I'm fearful a lot of times, or I'm not great with, relationships or money, whatever. You see these patterns, you identify them, and you'll probably see that happen over and over and over again in your life. You get those down, you get them out, you share them, you confess them, and then you let go. You have to let go of that stuff. All those things are holding you down. They say it's like this rock that's holding you down, right? Like if you're trying to swim and this rock's dragging you down, you got to drop the rock. You got to let go. You got to let that stuff pass. You have to identify it. You have to figure out what your character flaws are. You had to like work through that, and then you got to let it go. And then you start moving into, a lot of people are probably familiar with the amends and reaching out to people and, making a list of the people and the situations and institutions and whatever, where you feel like you maybe need to make a change, you need to address or talk to them. You get that on paper. It's very therapeutic. And then you actually take the step of like reaching out to those people that when it's safe and appropriate, and you can talk to them, and it's so freeing to like let go, to talk to people who maybe you thought would never ever talk to you again, or you're able to demonstrate like, hey, I'm on this road, I'm making changes, I'm living this way. You're not even really necessarily saying you're sorry. You're saying, I acknowledge this thing. I had this thing that I did. What can I do? Is there anything I can do? And here's what I'm doing to like improve myself. Because they probably, if it's somebody who you've heard a lot, they probably have heard you say, I'm sorry a million times. It doesn't mean anything. They want to see action. They want to see like, what is Nick doing? How is he changing? How is he living his life? Sometimes it's not even appropriate. Sometimes the best way you can make amends with somebody or a thing is through a living amend, which just means you live your life the best way that you can. You live your life to, the way that you would like to see, where you're trying to be as positive as you can, and you're not making the mistakes you were in the past. And then once we move past that, it's like, it's being more thoughtful and conscious and praying and meditating and thinking about like, when you make mistakes, how do I make these remedies? How do I let go a little bit? I think that's a scary one too, is when people talk about prayer and meditation. Again, it certainly can be to God and, to Jesus. But for a lot of people, prayer and meditation, once you get into, the later steps, it's being more thoughtful and thinking like, just not reacting. We all have these egos, and we think everybody is so concerned about us and what we're doing, and we always think we're right, and that people are maybe out to get us or doing us wrong. And it's like just taking a breath and thinking like, man, I just got cut off in traffic, and instead of like swearing or give them the finger, it's like they're probably running late. Or you walk down the hall and somebody doesn't say hi to you, well, they're probably going to a meeting. Your 3-year-old has a temper tantrum and throws spaghetti across the room. He's 3 years old. He can't control his emotion. He doesn't have emotional regulation, And when people are making these decisions in life, like chances are it's not about you. And like, how do you pause instead of being reactive and think about like, how should I act? Like maybe I play the tape forward. How would I want the response to be? How do I live with empathy and grace, right? Instead of being judgmental all the time. I mean, and I think that is a huge step for a lot of people into that meditation and prayer and just doing that. And it can work, right? There are ways you can get down on your knees and pray to Jesus and ask for help. God, Jesus, help me through this situation. I'm struggling with my family or at work or whatever. But I think just being intentional about taking a pause, taking a moment, thinking, being intentional about it really helps a lot of people.
One of the things we talk about a lot on this show is just like purpose, or even just this concept of meaning, right? Like, why am I here? Now that you're where you're at in this walk, how has your viewpoint or your concept of the purpose of your life or the meaning of your life shifted?
Shifted a lot, and it's hard. I see that in early sobriety is like, when you are in active drug use or alcoholism, it's all consuming all the time. It's like having 2 extra kids. I mean, you're a father, I'm a father, like it is all consuming all the time. And when you get rid of that, there's a big hole, and you have to fill it with something. If you just get sober and you don't do anything and you just watch TV or, whatever, you're not going to be happy. If the alternative, if being sober isn't better than using, you're not going to stay sober. It's not going to happen. You had to find something to give you purpose and something to give you meaning. I think that one of the reasons 12-step programs work well at that is the 12-step is about giving back and helping others. Sharing the tips and tools and strategies you've used to be successful in recovery with other people is baked into the program. So that is the 12-step is you got to give back. You got to help, right? In early recovery, when you don't have a lot of space and time and emotion for other things, or you're just trying to stay sober, just being able to focus on that and like have your purpose and meaning being like sharing your story, going to a meeting, talking about your struggles, so that newcomer who comes in, they can hear, that was me, or, oh man, that really resonates, or I had that same situation with my family, or I did that thing, I'm not alone. You don't even necessarily think that it might be helping, but it is. And that's a good way to at least start in the beginning, those early stages of sobriety, to help give you meaning and purpose, is to help people attain sobriety, attain recovery, do those things, like by sharing your story to do that. And I do think like we can't do that forever, right? You'll get past early recovery, 6 months to 9 months to a year. Your brain heals. The pathways that used to get triggered, they start to fade. You're not going to be thinking, I want to drink, I want to use all the time. It's not going to be top of mind always. Maybe when you first start in sobriety, you're going to go to 4 or 5 meetings a week, or you're going to be calling people or friends or networks and just thinking about not drinking, not using. That'll fade, that'll subside. So you got to find something, right? You got to find something to like keep you going. You have to find your meaning and your purpose. And I think that's the key to, finding happiness. And I think it's a lot of what a lot of us avoid too in active addiction and active alcoholism is like life is hard and we face these challenges, and taking on something new or an obstacle or starting a new hobby or, learning a skill or a trade, like that stuff takes work and dedication. And, it can be easier to just escape. It can be easier to just let go, to just use, to just drink, to, whatever it is. So I do, for me, reframing my sense of like purpose and meaning, it's changed a ton in the last handful of years. A big part of it is kind of like I mentioned, sharing my story, sharing what I've been through to help other people. I speak at recovery centers in places like Hazleton, Neosis. I wrote a book, which maybe we can talk about a little bit. I'm pretty public with my journey, I think, because, like, again, one of the things, too, pre-recovery, when I thought about volunteering or giving myself to other people, it's like, well, that's why would I help other people? It's not helping me. Or why am I going to volunteer my time? And what I realized in recovery is, like, I get just as much out of volunteering and sharing myself and time. I've experienced just as much joy and excitement and as I do, hopefully, when other people can learn and resonate from the things that, like, I have shared, the things that I'm saying and doing. So that's been, like, a big piece of my recovery journey and finding purpose and meaning is, like, how can I help? How can I volunteer? How can I be less selfish and more, selfless and help other folks? And then you do have time, right? You still have this gaping hole to find other things that maybe a hobby you've lost or a thing you didn't, or you can really show up with your family all the time and be 100% always and be with your kids. Like martial arts has been a big one for me that, like, I was into it for a long time. I lost it and I've gotten really back into it. I've done a lot of reading and writing, just like you got to find other things, healthy things. Fitness has been a huge one for me, right? Like that's been a big, making sure, like, we're starting to be middle-aged now. It's like, I got to do something. I got to take care of myself. And, that's a healthy thing. That's a healthy thing I can do in my life to, like, feel good, to be able to show up every day. But you'll have the time and energy to focus on that. But it is like, you got to have something, right? You can't just stop using it and expect to be happy.
One thing I am curious about, just because, again, the emphasis for this show just to be about faith and belief. I am curious, for someone who went through this process, if you're speaking to someone, maybe it's not, addiction that's a part of their life. Maybe it's just something else. How does your worldview change when you say there is something bigger than me?
I think it gets a lot easier. It gets a lot easier when you realize that you're not the one in control. when you realize there's something greater than yourself and you're not that important. Like I said, we have these egos and we think like, we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. When you give up and you realize like, I can give these problems I'm having, I can give them up to God, or I can give them up to my higher power, it gets easier to do stuff. And I think it also helps you to live with more empathy and grace. Like life is hard no matter what, even if you're successful or thriving or successful in recovery, like there's going to be obstacles. And like to navigate that and lose the judgment and the harshness and realize like, I can't do that. I'm not in control of this person. I'm not in control of this situation. They're just trying to do their best and show up every way, every day that they can too. It just makes life easier and more fulfilling. But faith for me too, it has grown. Like when I first started in recovery and part of AA, like entered my life and I embraced it and it was like, I need to stay sober. It was the group consciousness and, just being that. But my faith, I have kind of returned to the faith I grew up with and, Christianity and Catholicism. And like church has become a decent part of my life and my family's life. And some of it is, the scripture and the things that are taught in the Bible. But a lot of it too is what I talked about in community. I probably spend, other than my house, the most time in my life at my church with my family and kids. They go to after-school programs there. My youngest is in preschool. There's community dinners. Last night we were at a carnival. My daughter's going to camp there this year. My wife had like a flower making activity a couple of weeks ago. It's a great community of people who are living with positive intent and modeling behaviors that, for the most part, I think, not everything, are conducive to like a better way of life and a healthier society. And I like being around that, and I like having my family around that. And, whether it's the 10 Commandments or the teachings of Jesus in the New Testament or whatever it is, it, again, has helped me to live a freer life, happier life. And it's helped me a lot, but I also like that I can see it in my family and my kids and, my partner. It has been powerful. And again, not everybody has to grow into that. It has a little bit for me, and, I would appreciate it. And my faith journey still has a way to go, right? I don't have everything figured out, and I'm certainly not, Einstein, or I'm trying to figure things out one day at a time, but I'm open to it, and I think that's the biggest piece.
What is your message to anyone who's watching or listening, and maybe they are going through something right now where they haven't taken that first step, or they're saying, I don't know where to start? What would you want someone to know?
In terms of like recovery and addiction, it's really hard to get sober, but it's possible. You can do it. It is, if you embrace the tools and the resources out there, you find your community. It's one of the things in sharing my story too is like, there is still a stigma out there about drug use and alcoholism, and it's seen as a weakness, and it's seen as like a less than thing. And I didn't want that, right? I wanted it to be a part of like my identity. I wanted to turn my kryptonite into my superpower, right? Like, how do I leverage this biggest fault in my life and use it to benefit me? So I decided I was going to talk about it. I'm going to share. I'm going to be open. I'm going to talk about what I did, where my struggles were. And I don't want to have the whisper campaigns or have other people control the narrative. Like, I want to have that like out in front and not be embarrassed and not be ashamed. I've done things that I regret, a lot of things. I don't feel great about, some of the ways that I acted and stuff in the past, but I'm here, I'm growing, I'm learning. And, I think it's okay, as hard as it is, it's like you mentioned, if you're out there and you're struggling, it's okay to give up. It's okay to like feel like you need to, reach out to somebody. You can find success. It is possible. You just have to want it, right? You have to want it. Like, you have to be the one who wants to get sober. And when you do that, whether, you go to treatment and you find your community or whatever, you can have success. It is possible. And life on the other side, it's not just better. It's exponentially better, okay? Like, physically, my mental health is better than it's ever been. My anxiety and my depression are gone. I'm not even medicated anymore. I mean, medications do serve a purpose. I'm not saying you shouldn't take them. Obviously, spirituality, social. I'm more social than I have been since my 20s. All that stuff on the other side. So if you're considering, like, is it worth it? Is life still worth living? Like, yeah, it's worth it, and it's way, way, way better. It's better. My life's the best it's ever been. Maybe since I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I was a little kid. Like excited for Santa Claus or something. It's the best it's ever been. So there's hope. You can do it. I've met a lot of people who are successful in recovery who've helped me. I've seen them do amazing things. It's the only disease where, like, once you get better, you're not just trying to get back to like where you were. You're actually above the version that you were before, right? So you can go on. You can do great things. It can be really amazing. So hang in there. And if you're the spouse or the partner or a loved one of somebody who's struggling, there really isn't a lot you can do other than just be the best version of yourself. You can't convince somebody to get sober. You can't make somebody stop using. You can't control them. You can't stop them. They're probably an adult. If they want to go out and use or they want to drink, like, they will do it. They will hide, they will lie, they will cheat, they will steal, they'll do whatever they need to do to continue to use. Part of your thing too is you just need to let go and just be there when they need you. You'll know when they need you. You'll know, like, the support that you can offer when it is. But it's hard, because you're watching your loved one struggle and you want to help them. You want to have them make a change. But they have to be the one who comes and makes that choice and decides, like, whatever the rock bottom is, whether it's like a crazy weekend or it literally is being homeless. They will find it. They'll get there, but we don't have control over that. And I know that was certainly the case for me.
You have a book, A Fragile Utopia, available online. You can find it. You've got a copy here, though. I'm guessing a lot of the stories that we shared today, are themes in that book. But I'd love to hear a quick pitch, for the folks watching, listening. Just what can they find in there?
Yeah, so A Fragile Utopia, you can get it on Audible, Amazon, fragileutopia.com. It's really like, it's kind of a memoir, but it goes a lot through early recovery. Like, what's it going to be like? How are you going to feel? What's post-acute withdrawal like? Those early, 6 to 9 months to a year. When you dive into the recovery community, it doesn't just talk about AA. It talks about other recovery programs and communities. There's a lot of good information and resources in there. It's pretty honest. It's pretty, like, people have said that, like, it doesn't pull any punches. It talks about what it's been like. I hope too, like, it drops for somebody who's struggling, right? Like, I hope there's breadcrumbs in there where you can see, like, because I talked about it was a slow roll over 20 plus years, but there was stuff going back to when I was in my teens, like, there's signs and they keep popping up time and time again over the years. And hopefully you can see that stuff and it can be a useful tool. One of the things I didn't expect when I published the book was, like, I thought it was going to be people who were struggling, with alcoholism or drug use who would read it, and they would, like, hopefully find something there. And that is the case sometimes, but a lot of people I've heard from are the loved ones of the people who are struggling, and, the parents and the moms and the spouses. And they have found some solace in it to, like, see what it's like from the other side. Because it's so hard to understand why your partner, significant other, or, your loved one is doing what they're doing. This gives a little bit of a glimpse into, like, the thought process and the mentality and how it built up and why you're making these choices and why you continue to use, and that, like, how you really don't, it's not really an option. You're not choosing alcohol over this person. It's like, there's no choice. I think it helps that, and it'll help people. What I've at least heard anecdotally from folks is, like, it helps them get a glimpse into what it's like and let them let go a little bit and realize, like, I can't change them. They're going to have to want to change, and they're not, like, intentionally trying to hurt me or do anything bad. It's just they're on this journey, and, hopefully they can see with my story and others like me, there is hope at the end.
Nick, it's been super fascinating to just kind of learn and hear from you. Is if people were to take away one thing, though, from hearing from you, what would you want that to be?
I think that it probably is, there's hope, and the other side is better, and not just better, exponentially better. Like, if you are struggling, you can get help, you can get better, you can get back to it. It seems like it's an inescapable hole when you're in it and when you're at your worst. It's hard to imagine like any kind of a positive thing in your life, but I've seen miracles, right? I've seen the higher powers up there doing something pretty incredible, because I've seen some amazing things happen out in the community. So hang in there if you're struggling, or if you know somebody who is, and you can see the other side.
Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Adam. Thank you.
Wow, what an awesome conversation with Nick. I really got a lot out of it. It was just really cool to see someone who has literally turned their life around, and you could see them before and you could see them after, and you see how different their life is now. And maybe for you, it's not alcohol, but maybe there is something in your life where there is this feeling of control, and it's gone from you being in control to that thing controlling you. And if that's the case for you, I hope that you can see what happened for Nick and maybe apply that to your own life. And I hope that this conversation has been an encouragement to you for that specific reason. Folks, we'll be right back here next Thursday, August 20th, with another brand new episode of Bigger Than Belief. Of course, again, this is what we do every week. Real stories about real faith and real people. What do you believe and why, and what difference does it make for you? That's what Bigger Than Belief is all about. So we'll be right back here next Thursday and everywhere you get your podcasts with another brand new episode. But for now, in the meantime, be well, and I will see you very, very soon.
Love podcasts? Love Minnesota?
Check out the WCCO podcast studio lineup.
Hear the top stories of the day with 4 things to know.
Discover top female athletes and teams from around the state on women in sports.
Dive into stories about faith and belief, from your local leaders to your neighbors next door, with Bigger Than Belief.
Stay in the know on the go with the WCCO podcast studio. Go to WCCO.com/podcasts.